Hello students, this is Coach Byrd from Byrd Brothers Chess. Welcome to another Byrd Brothers Chess video. So today we're going to cover another part of our 3 move series where we will be assigning this as an exam. However, this time will be with the white pieces with the Queen's Gambit, specifically the Queen's Gambit, the client variations. So our queen has quite the number of enemies. She has Mr. Albin, Mr. Chigorin, Mr. Marshall, Miss Baltic, Miss Symmetrical, Mr. Semi-Slav, and Miss Pure. So she has quite the number of enemies, but we'll be covering very simple responses to all of these enemies that she has, okay? And there are some unique abilities that we have that's universally used. And I'm going to go over Shatter. Okay? So let's say, for example, the marshals when a knight defends the pawn. Very common name for lines where the knight goes to f6. So against the marshal, we use Shatter. Now, what is Shatter? Once again, like I said, stated in the previous video, Shatter is when we capture a central pawn, namely one that has no pawn support. Like there's no pawn on e6 or c6. So in these scenarios, only the knight or queen could recapture, or bishop, or whatever is available for our opponent. And so it really fractures their sense of presence in the middle of the board, because you want typically to have pawns in the middle of the board. So we are almost obliged to capture this pawn when we have this type of opportunity. So the ability, once again, its name is Shatter. We shatter these types of positions. So let's start with the first move. Once again, you play d4, d5, queen's pawn opening, we offer a gambit. Our opponent, let's go through this line one more time. The marshal with the knight response, Shatter. If your opponent plays the Baltic, which is bishop, and not even protecting the pawn at all, but their plan is to take this knight. Once again, we have an in-between move. We will cover that later on our 4th move series. We Shatter. Only the queen can recapture. Be symmetrical. Guess what? Yep, you named it. Shatter. No pawn can recapture. And even if black recaptures, that's not sound. We'll go over that later on. Or you probably should know what to do. And now I'll go ahead and tell you guys, just queen a4 check. In between move, then you win the pawn back. Let's get back to the 3-move set focus. So, marshal, Baltic, symmetrical, you shatter them all. Simple. What about Chigorin? Well, against this setup of his, we want to use the queen's Steed, because we want to focus on controlling our opponent's binding square, which is d5. If we can control this square and bind our opponent, it restricts and limits their piece flexibility and mobility. It really puts them in a literal bind. So we're threatening c takes d5 with the support of the knight here, which is more powerful. So you have to be a little careful here with Shatter, because the knight is attacking on d4. That's why we need to play here first and have more permanent control of the square if we're able to shatter at this point. For an example, I know this is a 4th move, but they play knight f6. Now we can play c takes d5 and shatter. Just a quick 4th move example. Here's a normal Queen's Gambit decline. This is more orthodox. Well, against the majority of these, you'll be playing a King Steed, which is more common. By the way, this Chigorin response with the Queen Steed is very uncommon. This is a very unique exception. Even though that word is pretty much saying it, but it's very unique in the list of exceptions that we execute. So, knight f3. And the hopes is to perhaps reach a Callan, because we'll do a King's Fianchetto with a Callan Den. So if we get to the 4 moves or 5th moves variations, you will see that then and when they execute. But namely, this bishop on c8 is not in a good spot because the bishop is blocked in by the pawn, and that's why we want to put as much pressure on this diagonal, seeing that this is a weakness for black. Alright, pure accepted gambit. We play what we refer to as a Saduleto. We want to be aggressive since they've acquired our flank pawn, but we now have full control of the mainland. What about the Semi-Slav, which is c6? Well, we do a king steed again. Against anytime your opponent protects this pawn, whether it's with the c pawn or the e pawn, we're going to use a king steed. Because at this point, we're trying to do multiple things at once. Secure our center, develop, and castle. Fundamentals. What about Mr. Albin with e5? Glad you asked. So we don't do a shatter in this example because there's a more freer pawn, which is the one on e5, and that is more useful to us, forcing our opponent to more than likely play d4. If they take the pawn, we just take their queen, and it's just winning for white. So namely, they're going to play d4 and try to fight for control of the mainland, but we are in better position to do so because we have the tempo. Because we took the pawn with tempo, whereas they're just pushing the pawn to try to bind us. They will bind us with d4, but it's not challenging to remove this bind. So one more time, in closing, we shatter the Marshall, Baltic, and symmetrical lines. I'm just doing the arrow so you can see Baltic, Marshall. All right. And against the accepted Queen's Gambit, Saduleto, and we use the King Steed. Anytime your opponent protects the pawn with C or E, King Steed. Whether it's the Semi-Slav with C6, or it is the Orthodox support of the pawn with E6, you are going to play King Steed, okay? And there's one exception, is if your opponent plays a Chigorin. You're going to play Knight C3, then the Queen Steed. So look for this to be in your homework, students. This is very easy. It should take less than 5 minutes because there are only 9 lines. 3 of those lines are Shatter, 2 are King Steed, 1 is Saduleto, and you got 1 as an accepted advance. We call this an accepted advance, by the way. That's the name of this in particular. And that's pretty much it. It should be it should be very easy for you guys, okay? So I look forward to you guys completing this as soon as possible. You got 1 is Queen Steed. So we should be able to knock this out, guys. So this is Coach Byrd. Thank you guys for hanging in for this very short video, and see you in the next video.